It is very important that you speak up when you feel compelled to, or when you feel called to, or when you feel that you just need to speak up about something because you've had enough of enough. But I also think it's equally as important how you speak up. And when we think about how we speak up, it's basically in terms of how do we present our rage? How do we present our anger? How do we present our disapproval or disagreement? And when we do that, when we have a tactic to actually show up in that mode, we can really do anything, because how you express your rage or your anger or your disapproval or your intervention or your removal of your body or your healthy boundary is as important as doing the thing. Because a lot of us can speak up and flip a table and yell or break a window or do something what people perceive as like overly aggressive. Working in a classroom with children, whenever they would express their rage or anger, it was usually seen as, whoa, we got to send you to the principal's office now, because they had little to no control or perceivable control over their actions, but also did not understand that that expression was then a threat to everybody else in the room, or perceived as a threat to everybody else in the room. So when you speak up, or even when you do speak up or feel like you're speaking up, sometimes your message doesn't get across because people perceive it as overly this or overly that. Now, I do not want anybody to get this twisted in this video. I'm not telling you how to speak up at all. I'm saying how you speak up will affect your message. They both are, I hold them both as important. And the reason why, and the only reason why I learned, is because of one day when I walked into a poetry slam when I was a sophomore in high school, and I saw a man on stage speaking to an entire room. Everybody was dead silent. And he was up there with his little book, reading his book of poetry. And he said, sometimes they don't see the light until their houses are on fire. And I was like, ooh, that's a cold ass line, my goodness. And I didn't really understand why this was happening, but I also more so didn't understand why all these people in the audience were just listening to this guy talk about civil discourse when people get houses set on fire. Like, that's the only time sometimes people see the light, or they start to like listen. He's talking about civil rights movements and whatnot, but the point being is, I didn't understand how this whole arrangement got to where it was. I was very blown away. I was like, wait, what? How does this happen? This guy on stage is saying this, and all of a sudden everybody's listening. If your goal is for somebody else to listen, then how you say what you're going to speak up is very important. So I'll tell you firstly how I came to this, and then three things that you can do to direct how you speak up. So how I came to this was through spoken word. And I come from a yelling family. People would just shout across the room. My parents would scream at each other, doors slamming. I think I was left in the living room alone many times as like a 2 or 3 year old, just like, okay, I guess people are done with each other. And that would happen so often that it became like, ingrained in me that I was like, oh, this is the way that you express yourself. When you want to speak up, you just yell, or you slam a door, maybe a picture falls off, the back, in the cartoons when they slam a door and like everything falls off the wall. And I accepted that, or I didn't really accept it because there was nothing to accept or push away. It was just the truth for me. It was my normal. Is that's how you express yourself until, and it wasn't that I was adopting those methods. I was just taking them as, I guess if people get mad, they start to yell. Until I saw spoken word where you could see people tell tales of anguish and sorrow and depression and deep sadness, and then soon victory through spoken word. And the rules were you could only speak for 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I think 10 seconds was the grace period. And that's all you could do. And you'd have your piece written and hopefully memorized, and then you would recite it to the audience. And it was this beautiful way of theater, or like presenting a monologue on stage, but it was a formulaic way of gathering all your thoughts together in one story and then boom, putting it out to the audience. And I thought it was so beautiful because essentially you had a compendium of life experience just delivered to people with a less than 4-minute piece. How often have we seen ourselves get twisted or get just essentially, we don't feel heard or seen even after we've spoken up? Many times. And the thing that I'll say that is one of the, it hurts the most after speaking up is when we know that we misrepresented ourselves. We know that we could have been a little clearer, or we could have really pinpointed and lasered it to this person or the situation. And when we let kind of our emotions take the wheel of when we're speaking, the message sometimes just doesn't get across. And so how you say what you're saying is going to be as effective as you making the choice to say what you're going to say. You can speak up all the time. It could be the boy who cried wolf. I mean, and then nobody's going to listen to you. But the point being is that I think the first thing to figure out, the first thing at 3 on how you're going to speak up is, why are you speaking up in the first place? What is it that you want from this? What is your goal that you want from this? What is the objective here? And once you figured out the objective, now we can figure out what else we need to put together to say what we're going to say. Again, I'm going to take a side step here. I'm not saying you need to write a whole spoken word piece to figure out how to speak up, or draw a healthy boundary. All I'm saying is that having a method of how you approach speaking up, it is so beneficial, because if things get to a point where you feel that you have to pop off, or you have to be like, you know what, I think I'm gonna lose my cool here, I need to leave. At least you know where that line is. At least you know where it is, and you have the self-control and self-awareness to understand where that line is. Many people don't even know where the line is, and they're just like, oh, you know what, okay, fine, all right, I'm out of here. And then they just end up walking out because they never set the line for themselves. When you figure out what your objective is, then you can figure out, okay, 2 and 3, how are you going to say it? And I think one part of how you're going to say what you're going to say is giving somebody essentially your experience, like saying, this is how I feel, like this is how this has made me feel. When when this. And instead of, and I've done this so many times where we do this so many times, and in a perfect world, people are using I feel statements and whatnot, but the idea is that this is how I feel when this is happening. It's not you're doing it, or, you're not placing any judgment or blame on anything. This is essentially it. This is how I feel. And when you can start to move from a place of how I feel, then it just removes them from it. It doesn't remove their entire onus from it, but it's just saying, look, dog, this is my world, and my world can't be circulating around whatever this is that's going on. We can't do that. This isn't gonna be sustainable at all. So find the objective, engage in I feel, and then lastly, what I would do for how you approach it is I would essentially be brutally honest. Like, how brutally honest can you be? How honest can you be with somebody and still maintain that relationship? I remember a friend told me this. He was, he's oh gosh, he's on dating apps, and this table's shaking. He's on dating apps, and he would say, after date number 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, you feel comfortable, you say, hey, where's this going? And I said, oh, cool, really? What? And doesn't that ever get awkward for people? It feels like it's necessary, right? As somebody I've just never done dating apps, I think it's a little bit of anxiety there. But he said, you're gonna have to have that conversation at some point. If you're gonna have an honest conversation with your significant other at some point, might as well have it now. And I was like, exactly. So if you're gonna have a real honest relationship with somebody or connection with somebody, you might as well be real and honest with them at that time as well, and be engaging in some language that's just just there. It's just boom. There's no way to pretty this up. This is how I feel. This is what's been happening. And when spoken word obviously has a little more artistry to it. There's a little more, act 1, act 2, act 3, and a hook to it. You're not explaining this to anybody with a hook or anything, but the thing that I always wanted students from my spoken word artist residency classes to get was, we start off with saying, when's the last time you yelled at somebody? And everybody would speak up and say, oh, this time, I yelled at the. And then I would say, okay, why did you yell? And many times they would say, because they weren't listening to me and I wanted to be heard. Or they did something and I really didn't like that. And many times these students would say, yeah, I yelled at my little brother. Or yeah, I yelled at my sister. Or, it was my mom or dad at the breakfast table. And they would always say the objective was they didn't feel heard. Many times they said it, not always. And they would essentially say that they felt yelling was the only choice they had. And I said, well, what if there was another option? Would you be interested in that? And they said, yes. And the idea is that if there's an alternative to the way that you've been speaking up, that can be a more effective way of speaking up, what way would that be? Perhaps that is a way that knows its objective, can speak from I feel statements, like can really directly source where your feelings are, and then also keep it brutally honest with this person. Like maybe that's an alternative way to speaking up, because many times we wait for the moment that we can just go kamehameha, we essentially just dump on somebody. Like we feel like, well, this is my chance. I can yell everything I want. I feel justified and righteous now. And it's less that, because the debt that occurs from dumping or just impulse, like unleashing on somebody, is that you now are essentially, you have to go back and possibly clean some of that up, or you have to possibly go back and re-explain some of that. You have to possibly go back and do it again. And Lord forbid, you speak up and then you have to speak up again. Like it just becomes, that's what turns into an argument or a Cold War. And I think the best way, in delivering a message is delivering a message that you feel satisfied with and that you know that it was clear. You don't have any second guesses or thoughts about it. You're not sitting around thinking, I should have said, I really could have got him with that. This is not a zero-sum game. You're not trying to get him, but it's, you said everything that you could have said. And that's it. And that is the beauty of speaking up, is in knowing you said everything you could have said. There's nothing else that needs to be said. And it's entrusting yourself that you're going to do it again. You're going to do the right thing again and say what needs to be said again, and not in a way that's going to get twisted. So I wish the best to you in speaking up and drawing a healthy boundary, or creating this new relationship, or even if this is a possible intervention that you have to have with somebody. I wish you the best in that. That's the end of this series on how to speak up, 7 to 7 videos. And I just wish you the best of it, because it's going to be happening for the rest of our lives. So yeah, here's to the rest of our lives and creating spaces where we can be honest with people and speak up all the time. We'll see you in the next one.